Since the start of the full-scale war against Ukraine, Russians have launched 6,000 missiles and more than 3,000 drones against Ukraine. The absolute majority targeted civilian objects and civilian infrastructure. Let's imagine how many lives have been disrupted by this. But Ukraine has a chance to start reconstruction during the war. It can be paradoxically or not, but Ukraine has already started the recovery process. And today we will describe solutions that people of Ukraine have implemented. The Solutions from Ukraine podcast is brought to you by the Rubryka media outlet. My name is Vladyslav Faraponov and I'm the co-host of this podcast. And before we start, let me remind you that you can support us at Patreon, at patreon.com/Rubryka. After you join us at Patreon, you'll be able to send us questions that we address in the podcast, and also you can get exclusive merch with solutions and Ukraine, of course. And let me introduce my co-host, Anastasia Rudenko, who is Rubryka's chief editor.
Hello, Vlad. Hello, our listeners. And it is not our first podcast about recovery in Ukraine, but today we want to dedicate it to grassroots solutions. There are a lot of them in Ukraine, but we want to highlight specific example.
And before we dive into the heart of today's story, let me talk about the background. Ukraine has faced immense challenges, of course, due to the conflict, but many families have been displaced from their homes. At the beginning of this year, the approximate data about the issue was like around 7 million Ukrainians are abroad, and up to 2 million were internally displaced, but again, this data is changing kind of really every day.
But amid these challenges, some individuals are determined to make a difference. For example, our story about People's Cooperation. Today we will talk about how Polish volunteers have stepped up to provide used windows for damaged Ukrainian houses.
Yeah, and let me explain. So, when bombs fall, like windows are the first to suffer from a blast of this wave. And in Poland, actually, volunteers have found a way to help Ukrainians with the restoration. So they collected used windows and they sent them to Ukraine. And actually, Rubryka learned about this, about the solution and like why it came from Poland.
Yes, it is quite. It looks like a simple idea from the first sight, but it is not so easy to implement, and it is a unique experience for now. Volunteers from Warsaw decided to help Ukrainians restore buildings destroyed by the Russians. They have been collected used windows all over Poland for more than a year. And they already were sending them to Ukraine. The window project is a joint initiative of Kiev architect Petro Vladimirov and Polish activist Zofia Jaworowska. They met on the wave of volunteering at the beginning of the full-scale war in 2022. And Polish activists worked with the Polish organization seeking housing for refugees from Ukraine. There were a lot of such Ukrainians, Vladimirov, who was in Warsaw when the full-scale war started, helped Ukrainian architects find work. By the summer last year, the number of refugees fleeing the war to Poland has significantly decreased. Volunteers began to think about how to support Ukrainians in other way and what effective ways will be. Then people began to return to the liberated territories of Kiev, Chernihiv regions, and for them, the problem of rebuilding destroyed settlements was very, very timely and relevant at the time.
Why windows?
Well, because of the explosions, glass and windows are the first things that are destroyed, and there is a lack of such materials, so we decided to concentrate on windows. And it is like quote of initiators of the process. We found out that Ukraine has no production of window glass, and before the war 75% it was imported from Russia and Belarus. Imagine.
Yeah, but it is really important to understand that since the beginning of the hostilities, actual windows in Ukraine have become really expensive. And not all people really can afford them. At the same time, Poland is basically one of the largest exporter of windows in the EU. So, like like those in charge of the project, they thought that it is a puzzle that can be put together to help those Ukrainians who are affected by the Russians' attacks. In addition, Poland has really strict laws about removing construction waste. People cannot just take a used window to a landfill. I believe they can do it in Ukraine, but still. And the window should be taken to a disposal point where it will be like separated into plastic and glass and kind of stuff like that. And obviously it takes a lot of time, and sometimes like people are not willing to do it just because of this long process. So these two guys, they created a fund and appealed to the residents of the Polish capital, actually Warsaw, and they appealed to the citizens with the simple request to share the plastic windows actually with Ukrainians that they have after the repairs. And on the very first day after the call, basically the citizens brought around 30 windows to the Warsaw Institute of Industrial Design, where the initiative basically was located at the time.
So the project has expanded. Am I right?
Yes. In September last year, the foundation that actually they founded in Warsaw, it sent more than 600 windows to the Kiev Charitable Foundation. So these windows were used to reconstruct a school and the kindergarten in the city of Hostomel in Kiev region. I just want to remind everyone that there is an airfield in Hostomel which Russians were really planning to capture, and it was one of the key points in the Kiev region when actually Russians were trying to get control of it. And another part, in addition to the part that was sent to Hostomel, was given to people who were kind of renovating their houses and apartments. And in spring this year, trucks with new bunches of Polish windows were sent to Ukraine's second largest city in the country, Kharkiv, which is in the east of Ukraine, and is right now actually heavily attacked by Russians. And in Kherson region, the kind of the major city of the region was liberated last November, but still some part of the Kherson region is still under Russian control. So in a year, the initiative has managed to ship about 1,500 windows to Ukraine. But the main problem obviously remains it is logistics. Like, we would like to remind everyone that airports are not working in Ukraine, and basically the Ukrainian Polish border is actually one of the most active in terms of traffic, and sometimes people can just wait in the lines around 10 or even more hours. So of course the problem number one is logistics, and the second is actually financing. So kind of transportation of this type of products is a really complicated and expensive process. Like those in charge of this project, they say that sending one truck from Kiev to Warsaw actually costs an average of at least 1,500 euros, which is really a lot. Of course, it's the reason why the project is constantly collecting funds and transportation. At the same time, we would also like to talk about Windows as a symbol today, and I will give the floor to Nastya.
A very important symbol, because of course Windows are the most fragile component in the building, but also it is in the meaning the slot for opportunity. I would like to tell you how journalists are uniting, because we already mentioned the word cooperation regarding recovery process, and I strict believer that in the recovery issue, cooperation is inevitable, and among journalists too, especially independent journalists, independent newsrooms. Which problem now we have? A media discourse about recovery in Ukraine is really fragmented. Reports from the ground don't appear at the national level. Public awareness of recovery is insufficient, and lack of resources, lack of, again, investigation capacities ensue it. And okay, we have the situation, but what is the solution? Now, independent media organizations, together with think tanks and other NGOs, unite in the Recovery Window Media Network to properly cover the recovery processes in Ukraine through joint efforts, initiate public control over the reconstruction, play a role of a watchdog over it, and offer solutions in cooperation with experts. Yeah, Rubryka is already part of it. And this coalition, after launch, wants to expand very quickly. So stay tuned. The announcement of Recovery Window Media Coalition will be soon. If you want more details or want to support somehow this idea, just reach out us in social media, Rubryka Solutions from Ukraine, or email us via team@rubryka.com.
You can find more episodes of the podcast at rubryka.com or your favorite podcast provider, Solutions from Ukraine, where we discuss problems and issues from Ukraine, and also the people who are doing something about them in the form of solutions.
So stay with us and remember to support us at patreon.com/Rubryka. Your support helps us produce more independent podcasting and reporting, which will result in more help for Ukraine to win this hard but important war.